Got so much work to do. Trying to talk to you. You give me five minutes of focus. Give me 5 minutes of focus. 5 minutes of focus. Give me 5 minutes of focus. Welcome to your 5-minute focus. Today's scripture will be coming from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9 through 10. And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Inside of us, all our weaknesses, there's something that we feel gets the best of us. There are things that I've told God, all right, if you just put your hand in this particular area, I think everything else will be all right. As we are seeking God and we're asking Him to assist us with our weaknesses, we're asking Him to touch us in those areas, we are seeing Him as greater than whatever that weakness is. Otherwise, we wouldn't bring it to Him. If you didn't think God would be able to change your situation, you wouldn't have brought it to Him. In our weakness, we also then have a chance to recognize God as being greater than whatever weaknesses we are experiencing. Paul knew that it wasn't him. It wasn't something in him that made that encounter with God happen. It was God working through him. And so he goes on to tell us there's always that one thing that sort of pulls us back to say, all right, when I feel like I'm about to get the big head about where I am, when I feel like I'm about to take on more credit for what's taking place in my life than I should, then, when I get to that point, I'm always reminded of how I got there. I'm always reminded of the fact that I'm not all of that. And that's where our thorn comes in. This is what Paul is sort of talking to. Once, I could do this. I could boast about all of the great things or how great I am, but there's a thorn in my flesh. There's a weakness. There's something that pulls me back, brings me back down to earth to let me know, hey, you're not all of that. Like you don't have it all together. And so when we get into 2 Corinthians 12, Paul talks about how he was like, listen, I asked God, I begged him. I went to God, I pleaded with God to take this weakness away from me, take this thorn away from me. And we never find out, we don't know exactly what that is, but we can apply whatever it is in our lives that we feel like is something that's always just there, it's always present. And so he says, I begged, I pleaded with God 3 times. I said, God, remove this from me. And then God says no. Like he says no. And he says, because my grace is sufficient for you. So he says, listen, I show up best in your weakness. Like I show up best when you don't come to the table as if you have it all together. Like I show up best when you don't come to me as if you have something to offer me. God says, I show up best when you come to me broken. You come to me with a need, because then my strength is made perfect in that weakness, and then I can use you, because it's if nothing ever was an opposition for us, if nothing ever went against what we thought should happen, then would we see God? And when you think about that, a lot of times we'll say, oh yeah, I still see God, but how often do we find ourselves, like if we're in a really good place spiritually, if we feel like things are going according to plan, I know me personally, I find it harder during those times to see God because now it's like, okay, you've got to be more intentional. You've got to focus on it. But the times that you know you feel like things are not going right and you're like, Lord, like the times you really need him to move, those when you don't have any problem seeking him. We find time. Like we could do we could pray all day in those instances. And this is kind of how our thorn works to our advantage. In the scripture, he says, listen, my strength is made perfect in weakness. He said, as you feel weak, it's like that's when I'm made strong. And what that tells us too is that we don't have to try to fix our weaknesses, right? Because if God, if you know that this thorn is here, if you know that this is in me, well, I don't have to fix it. I just have to trust you. I have to just lean on your strength and your sufficiency, like your grace to get me through it. I don't have to remove this thorn myself. And that's what we often do. We try to remove our weaknesses so that then we can present ourselves to God. But God knows, He already understands what those weaknesses are. So we don't have to remove them. We don't have to do anything with them. All we have to do is release them to Him. That's all the time we have for today. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. This has been your 5 minute focus.